According to legend, this sculpture in Rome is looking up in horror and fear that this church would collapse. This is the Fountain of the Four Rivers in the Piazza Navona, and this was designed by the superstar sculptor of the Baroque era, Gian Lorenzo Bernini. In front is the work of his rival, Francesco Borromini. But how did this legend even start in the first place? Well, first let's talk about Borromini, who designed the Church of St. Agnes in Agony. He was a hot-tempered, hot-headed, introverted architect that no one really liked working with. If you look at the two anthropomorphic depictions of major rivers, you can see that the Nile is shielding his eyes away from this church, while Rio de Plata looks like he's terrified of the structural integrity. Basically, Bernini was saying that Borromini's work sucks. But this story told by countless tour guides isn't quite accurate, because this fountain was actually built years before this church was ever built. But the rivalry is very real. By 1629, Madenno was constructing St. Peter's Basilica, and his nephew, Borromini, was helping him. But later that year, he died, and he left vacant the position of chief of construction for Pope Urban VIII. Surely, Borromini, with years of experience, would have been the top man for the job. But nope, the Pope had an infatuation with an extroverted sculptor that was a superstar, Bernini. Bernini was tasked with building the massive 9-story canopy in the middle of St. Peter's Basilica. But with no architectural experience, he needed a helping hand. Thus, he hired Borromini. This was immediately praised as a masterpiece, and Bernini gave Borromini no credit. In 1637, Bernini had his biggest contract yet, to build 2 massive bell towers to beautifully frame Michelangelo's dome. But wait a minute, I don't see any bell towers. One of them started forming cracks under construction. The cardinals started panicking and holding meetings as to what can be done in order to save the basilica. Well, they consulted with who else? Borromini, who delivered a thrashing assessment saying that not only would the towers be compromised, but the entire basilica. The new pope decided to destroy those towers. Bernini was blacklisted from sculpting and architecture contracts for a while. Meanwhile, Borromini continued building beautiful structures like these. Despite being an architectural genius, no one really liked working with him. Years later, in 1656, Bernini managed to get back in the good graces of the Pope and built the magnificent St. Peter's Square. In 1667, after years of struggling with manic depression, Borromini, in a fit of rage, burned all of his drawings and archives. Then he took out his sword and fell on it. Borromini was no longer. Meanwhile, Bernini continued to live on to the ripe old age of 81 years old, creating some of the most magnificent Baroque sculptures that the world has ever seen. Let me know, do you think this should become a Netflix or HBO series? And who should play Bernini and Borromini respectively? Stay curious, my friends.